My hands were shaking as I clicked play. The video loaded, and there she was, Emily, my wife, lying on our bed. But she wasn't alone. Mark, her boss, stood at the edge of the frame, loosening his tie, a smug grin on his face. Emily laughed, that same laugh she used to save for me, and pulled him closer. A cold wave of nausea hit me. This wasn't some misunderstanding. No weird angle or bad timing could explain away what I was watching. My wife wasn't just cheating, she was enjoying every second of it. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. He'll never find out. He's too stupid to even suspect a thing. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Too stupid? A bitter chuckle escaped my throat. Oh, Emily, if only you knew. I minimized the video, my mind racing. This wasn't just betrayal. This was mockery. She thought I was clueless. She thought she could get away with it. But she had no idea what was coming next. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling everything and nothing at the same time. My heart pounded in my ears, a sickening drumbeat of betrayal. Emily, my wife, my partner, my supposed best friend, was sprawled out on our bed with another man. Mark, her boss, the guy she always claimed to hate. And yet, here she was, whispering things to him, touching him like she once touched me, laughing at my expense. Too stupid to even suspect a thing. A hollow chuckle escaped my lips. If only she knew. I didn't react right away. No screaming, no punching walls, no throwing my laptop across the room. The anger was there, yes. It burned deep, threatening to take over. But I forced myself to stay still, to breathe, to think. Because this wasn't going to end with me just confronting her. No, that was too easy. She had already decided I was an idiot. I needed to be smart. I pressed record on my screen, capturing every moment of their disgusting betrayal. The way she kissed him, the way she giggled, the way she pulled him closer, whispering, "He'll be gone for 3 days. We have all the time in the world." 3 days. 3 days where she thought she could do whatever she wanted, believing I'd never know. Oh, Emily. I copied the footage onto a separate drive, then another, making sure I had multiple backups. No way in hell was she going to talk her way out of this. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened our shared cloud storage and uploaded the video. It wasn't public yet. I wasn't that reckless, but it was there. Just one click away from being shared with anyone I wanted. Now, I needed a plan. As the initial shock settled, my mind started piecing things together. Emily's distance over the past few months. The late nights at work. The sudden shift in her phone habits, always keeping it face down, setting it to silent, taking it with her even to the bathroom. And then there were the little lies. The dinner she had with the girls, when I found out later that none of them had seen her. The perfume on her clothes that wasn't hers. The missing time in her schedule that never quite made sense. I should have seen it sooner. Maybe some part of me did, but I didn't want to believe it. That was over now. I wasn't the kind of man who could just let this slide. I could already see 2 paths forming in my mind. 1, I could confront her the moment I got home, let my rage take over, yell, demand answers, throw her out. But that's what she'd expect. That's what every fool in my position would do. Or, I could play the long game. Let her think everything is fine. Let her believe she got away with it. And then, when she least expected it, boom. Complete destruction. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The choice was obvious. I wasn't just going to end this marriage. I was going to ruin her. The next morning, I called in sick to work. No way in hell was I going to sit through meetings and pretend like everything was fine. Instead, I made some phone calls. First, a divorce lawyer. I needed to know my options. I wasn't going to be the guy who got screwed in the split while she walked away free to keep screwing her boss. Second, I called my friend Jake, a tech guy who knew a thing or two about online exposure. Hypothetically, I asked him, if someone wanted to make sure a certain video got seen by a very specific group of people, how would they do it? He laughed. Hypothetically? Easy. Emails, social media leaks, even good old-fashioned USB drops. Why? No reason, I lied. I spent the rest of the day gathering evidence. Screenshots of Emily's recent messages, bank statements showing suspicious transactions, timestamps of her supposed late nights at work. By the time I was done, I had enough to bury her. Now, all that was left was to act like nothing had changed. The moment she saw me, she would have no idea that I already knew. And that was the part one was going to enjoy the most. The moment my plane landed, I felt my pulse quicken. It was an odd sensation, this eerie calm sitting just beneath the raging storm inside me. I should have been out of control, but instead, my mind was sharp, focused. I stepped out of the airport, slid into my car, and started driving home, my grip on the wheel tightening with every mile. Emily had no idea that I was coming back early. No idea that her world was about to crack open beneath her feet. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Too early for her to be asleep, too late for her to be out running errands. My heart hammered as I stepped inside, the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air. Not hers. Not mine. His. I locked the door behind me, moving through the house like a ghost, every detail burning into my mind. A half-finished glass of wine on the kitchen counter. A faint imprint in the couch cushions, still fresh. She had been here, recently. I walked to the bedroom. Empty. But the bed, our bed, was unmade, the sheets tangled, a carelessly discarded shirt on the floor. Not mine. Mark's. A slow, bitter smirk twisted my lips. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. Footsteps sounded down the hall. I stepped back, slipping into the shadows of the room. My heart pounded in my chest, but my breathing stayed even. Control. I needed control. Emily appeared in the doorway, her phone in hand, her fingers tapping away at a message. Probably to him. Probably telling him how much she missed him. Disgust coiled in my gut, but I didn't move. Not yet. I watched her, the way she sauntered in, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband was standing in the darkness, watching, knowing, planning. She climbed into bed with a satisfied sigh, tossing her phone onto the nightstand. The glow from the screen illuminated her face just long enough for me to catch a glimpse of the text on display. Tonight was amazing. I wish you were still here. A slow exhale left my lips. It wasn't rage that filled me now. It was something colder, sharper. I took a step forward. Emily turned her head, her brows knitting together. What the hell? Her voice was groggy, caught between confusion and irritation. What are you doing home? I let the silence stretch, let her feel it pressing against her skin. Then, slowly, deliberately, I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. The video played, the sound of her breathless laughter filling the air. The way she whispered his name, the way she moved beneath him, the way she said my name in mockery. Her face drained of color. She sat up too quickly, nearly knocking over her glass of water on the nightstand. Where did you get that? My voice was quiet. Too quiet. Where do you think? Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Lies, she was searching for them, trying to string them together into something convincing. But there was no saving this. You went through my stuff? Her voice sharpened, desperate to flip the blame. That's sick. You know that? Invading my privacy like that? Spying on me. A dry laugh escaped me. Spying. I repeated, shaking my head. You brought another man into our bed, and I'm the one in the wrong? She shot up from the bed, her expression shifting from shock to something uglier. You know what? Maybe if you weren't such a boring, predictable. My laugh cut her off, sharp and humorless. Go ahead. Say it. Tell me how it's my fault you spread your legs for your boss. Tell me how I drove you to cheat. She hesitated, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. Maybe if you were more exciting, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. There it was. The excuse. The justification. I stared at her, feeling nothing but a cold, detached amusement. She still thought she had control, still thought she could twist this into something where she wasn't the villain. She had no idea how far she'd already lost. I took another step forward, and for the first time, I saw it. Fear. It flickered in her eyes, just for a second. She knew, deep down, that I wasn't going to react like one of her little soap opera husbands, crying and begging for answers. She didn't know what I was capable of. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Her gaze flickered to it. I already knew who it was. Slowly, I reached for the device, turning it over. Mark. A slow smirk tugged at my lips. Let's see what your real boyfriend has to say. Her eyes went wide. Give me my phone. I ignored her, swiping open the message thread. His words filled the screen. I can't stop thinking about tonight. He's such an idiot. You played him perfectly. Emily lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, holding it just out of reach. A slow, dangerous grin stretched across my face. You think I'm an idiot, huh? I mused. Good. Keep thinking that. It'll make what happens next even better. She froze, uncertainty clouding her features. What do you mean? What happens next? I didn't answer. Instead, I turned, walked toward the bedroom door, and paused just long enough to let her hear my parting words. Sweet dreams, Emily. Then I walked away. She had no idea what was coming next. The door clicked shut behind me, but I didn't leave the house. I wanted her to think I was done, that I was storming off in anger like any other husband would. That's what she expected. But I wasn't just going to walk away and lick my wounds. No, I had work to do. I stepped into my office, locking the door behind me. The weight of the phone in my hand felt heavier now. Emily hadn't even tried to deny it. No apologies, no tears, just excuses and blame shifting. It wasn't regret she felt. It was annoyance at being caught. I sat at my desk, opening my laptop. The video was still on the screen, paused right on her smirking face as she pulled Mark down on top of her. I pressed play for just a second, enough to hear her breathy laughter, then shut it off. My jaw tightened. I couldn't watch it again. Not right now. Instead, I opened an email. To Emily's friends, her family, her coworkers, every single person who mattered in her life. I typed out a simple message, no dramatic explanations, no angry rants. Just the truth. I thought you all should see what Emily has been up to while I was away. She always said honesty was important. Here's a little honesty for you. I attached the video, my finger hovering over the send button. But then I stopped. No, not yet. Timing was everything. If I sent it now, she'd go into damage control mode. She'd spin her lies, twist the narrative, make me out to be the bad guy. I needed to be patient. Instead, I set the email to send automatically in 24 hours. By then, she'd think I was just sulking, licking my wounds. She wouldn't see it coming. I leaned back in my chair, inhaling deeply. My hands were still trembling, but not from sadness. From adrenaline. From anticipation. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Morning came too soon. I barely slept, but I didn't feel tired. The moment I stepped out of my office, I heard movement in the kitchen. Emily, acting as if everything was normal. As if last night hadn't happened. I walked in to find her standing at the counter, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone like she wasn't a lying, cheating snake. When she looked up, her face was blank, unreadable. "Are we going to talk about this?" she asked casually, like she was discussing the weather. I poured myself a cup of coffee, taking my time, letting the silence stretch. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, even. "What's there to talk about?" She scoffed. "Oh, I don't know. The fact that you spied on me like some obsessed psycho? That you're trying to trap me instead of acting like a grown man?" I laughed, shaking my head. "You still don't get it, do you?" She narrowed her eyes. "Get what?" I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. "You lost, Emily." She froze. Just for a second. Then, she forced out a laugh, shaking her head. "Lost what?" I smiled. Not a friendly smile. A cold, knowing smile. "Everything." Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down at it, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Mark, again." I could see it in the way her grip tightened, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. She was realizing, piece by piece, that she wasn't in control anymore. "Good." She set her coffee down with a sharp clink. "You think you can ruin me?" She sneered. "Go ahead. No one's going to care. My friends will take my side. My family will see the video." I cut in smoothly. Her mouth snapped shut. She looked down at her phone, as if she expected it to betray her at any moment. "You're bluffing." I took another sip of coffee. "Try me." For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough to make sure she felt the weight of my words. "You made your choices, Emily. You thought I'd be too weak, too stupid to fight back. But you forgot one thing." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "What?" I leaned in, just close enough that she could hear the cold amusement in my voice. "I'm not the idiot you thought I was." I turned, walking out of the kitchen before she could respond. She had no idea what was coming next. The day passed in a blur of silence. Emily wasn't stupid, she knew something was coming, but she didn't know what or when. That uncertainty ate at her, and I could see it in the way she kept glancing at me from across the room, checking her phone every few minutes, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. She wasn't used to feeling powerless. She was always the one in control, always the one pulling the strings. Not this time. I left the house in the afternoon without saying a word, giving her just enough time alone to let her paranoia fester. I knew she'd try to cover her tracks, delete messages, maybe even run to Mark for help. It wouldn't matter. The email was already scheduled. The evidence was locked in. I had only one more thing to do before the final blow. I pulled into the parking lot of Mark's office building, sitting in my car for a moment, watching the entrance. A part of me wondered if Emily had already warned him, if she had sent him a desperate text telling him to fix this before it was too late. But no, if she had, he wouldn't still be sitting comfortably in his glass-walled office, sipping coffee like his world wasn't about to burn. I stepped inside the building, walking with the confidence of a man who belonged there. No one questioned me. No one stopped me. By the time I reached his office, I barely hesitated before pushing open the door. Mark looked up, startled. He wasn't expecting me. I shut the door behind me, locking it. "We need to talk." His confusion turned to irritation. "Look, I don't know what it." I slid my phone onto his desk, hitting play on the video. His face drained of color in an instant. He reached for the phone, but I snatched it back before he could touch it. "Sit down." He hesitated, eyes flickering toward the door like he was debating whether to call security. I tilted my head slightly, daring him. He sat. I leaned against the desk, arms crossed, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make him sweat. "You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you?" He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't bother. I don't want your excuses. I don't care about your reasons. What I care about is what happens next." Mark swallowed hard, his fingers gripping the edge of his desk. "What do you want?" I smiled, slow and cold. "I already have what I want. You're the one with something to lose." He blinked, confused. I leaned in slightly. "Your job, your reputation, your marriage, if you even have one." His throat bobbed. He did have a wife. A woman who probably had no idea what kind of man she was married to. I tapped my phone screen, pretending to consider something. "I could send this video to HR. To your boss. To every single person who respects you. You'd be done. Fired. Blacklisted." A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "You wouldn't." I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Try me." He licked his lips, panic creeping into his expression. What do you want?" I straightened, pocketing my phone. "For now? Nothing. I just wanted you to know that I own you now. That every time you see me, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that I hold the knife to your throat, that at any moment, I can choose to press down." He looked like he was going to be sick. I stepped back toward the door, unlocking it. "Oh, and one more thing." I smirked. "Stay away from my wife. Not that it'll matter soon." Then I walked out, leaving him sitting there, shaking. By the time I got home, the tension in the air was so thick I could taste it. Emily sat on the couch, staring at her phone screen, her knee bouncing restlessly. She had seen something. The email hadn't sent yet, but she knew the hammer was about to drop. She looked up when I entered, her expression carefully blank. "What did you do?" I kicked off my shoes, taking my time, savoring her fear. "What do you think I did?" She shot up from the couch, her voice sharp. "I know you did something. Mark called me. He's freaking out." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Good." She stormed toward me, jabbing a finger into my chest. "You think this is funny? You think you can just ruin my life because you're mad?" I tilted my head. "Why not? You didn't seem to have a problem ruining mine." She scoffed. "Oh, please. You're acting like a child. Do you even realize what you're doing?" I leaned in slightly, dropping my voice. "Do you?" Her breath hitched. For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. "Good." I stepped past her, heading toward the bedroom. "You might want to check your phone again in a few hours." I called over my shoulder. "Should be interesting." I didn't have to turn around to know she was panicking. I could feel it. The storm was coming, and she had no way to stop it. The house felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode at any moment. Emily was unraveling. Every second that passed without her knowing what I had planned chipped away at her confidence. She was pacing the living room now, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her breathing shallow and erratic. I didn't say a word. I wanted her to stew in it. Finally, she snapped. "Are you seriously going to just stand there and act like you're some kind of mastermind?" She spat, her voice sharp, desperate. "You think you're in control? You're pathetic." I raised an eyebrow, leaning against the counter, sipping my water. "Am I?" She let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. "Yeah, you are. Because at the end of the day, you're still the same weak little man who let me walk all over him. You're still just standing here, playing mind games instead of actually doing anything." I smirked. "You sure about that?" Her phone buzzed. Her entire body stiffened. Slowly, hesitantly, she looked down at the screen. Her face drained of color. I already knew what it was. The email hadn't gone out yet, but my little teaser had. A few anonymous messages, just enough to let her know that the walls were closing in. Just enough to make her wonder how much longer she had before everything crashed down around her. "Who sent this?" she demanded, gripping the phone like she could crush it in her hands. I shrugged. "Does it matter?" She turned to me, her eyes wild. "What the hell are you doing?" I took a slow step toward her. "I'm making sure you finally understand what it feels like to lose." Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time in her miserable life, she looked truly afraid. Good. She tried to recover, shaking her head, forcing a sneer onto her face. You're bluffing. You wouldn't actually do it. You wouldn't destroy my life over one mistake. I laughed, cutting her off. One mistake. I echoed. You really think that's all this was? She blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like she was scrambling for the right words. How long, Emily? I asked, my voice calm but razor-sharp. How long have you been sneaking around with him? She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. I nodded. That's what I thought. Her shoulders squared, and she suddenly looked angry again, trying to regain her footing. You know what? Fine. Yeah, I cheated. And what? You were boring, okay? You were predictable. You acted like I was supposed to be grateful for a man who did nothing but go to work and come home like some sad little puppy. I chuckled, shaking my head. You really don't know when to shut up, do you? She folded her arms, scowling. What? You think you're some kind of hero now? That people are going to take your side when they see you acting like this? I tilted my head slightly. Why don't we find out? Her phone buzzed again. This time, I could see the terror in her eyes. She practically lunged for her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she desperately checked her accounts, her messages. No, no, no. She muttered under her breath. I leaned against the counter, watching her with amusement. Something wrong. She ignored me, clicking faster, scrolling through her emails. Then she froze. Her head turned toward me slowly, her eyes wide with sheer panic. You. Her voice was barely a whisper. You sent it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She shot up from her seat, marching toward me like a woman possessed. You ruined me, she shrieked, shoving me. You absolute piece of... I caught her wrist before she could hit me again, my grip firm but not aggressive. No, Emily, I said quietly. You ruined yourself. She yanked away, breathing hard, chest rising and falling in sharp, frantic bursts. You don't understand. You don't get it. I have friends. I have people who will take my side. I sighed, shaking my head. Check again. She did. And that was the final nail in her coffin. The messages had started flooding in. Her friends, her coworkers, her family. Every single person she had lied to, manipulated, fooled into thinking she was some perfect, innocent woman had seen the truth. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the responses. What the hell, Emily? You're disgusting. I can't believe I defended you. Lose my number. She let out a choked sound, somewhere between a sob and a growl. No. No, 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 this can't be happening. I exhaled slowly, finally feeling something close to peace. It's already done, Emily. She turned to me, eyes filled with a mixture of rage and desperation. You think this makes you better than me? I stared at her, dead in the eyes. No, Emily. It just makes me free. She stood there, shaking, her entire world crumbling around her. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt nothing for her. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just relief. Emily stood frozen, gripping her phone like it was the last thing tethering her to reality. Her face had gone pale, her breath short and ragged. The weight of her downfall was finally sinking in. I watched her unravel, arms crossed, waiting. How could you do this? Her voice was hollow, barely above a whisper. She looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger, as if she couldn't comprehend the man standing before her. You sent it to everyone? I exhaled through my nose. I told you, Emily. Actions have consequences. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Consequences? You think this is fair? You think this makes you some kind of righteous avenger? She gestured wildly, her nails digging into her palms. You're insane. You just nuked my entire life. I tilted my head slightly. No, Emily. You did that. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see what was already there. She let out a shaky breath, pacing in tight circles. They're all turning on me. She swiped at her phone, scrolling through the flood of messages. Even my own friends. Guess they weren't really your friends then. Her head snapped up. Shut up. She flung her phone across the room. It smacked against the wall and clattered to the floor. I didn't even flinch. Do you have any idea what you've done? She hissed. My job, my career, everything I built, gone. I raised an eyebrow. Your career? You mean the one where you were screwing your boss? The one you only kept because you had leverage on him? I scoffed. Yeah, Emily. Real impressive legacy. She clenched her jaw, her hands curling into fists at her sides. You think you're better than me? I leaned in slightly, voice calm, measured. No, Emily. I just think I'm done being your doormat. She flinched, like the words physically hit her. For a long, tense moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was heavy, suffocating. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to find a way out, an escape, a way to twist the situation to her advantage like she always had. But there was no way out. Not this time. Then, her expression changed. The anger didn't disappear, but it shifted, morphed into something else. Manipulation. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes softening just enough to feign vulnerability. Listen. I know I messed up, okay? She took a hesitant step closer. I was stupid. I made a mistake. But we can fix this. I almost laughed. Fix this. She nodded quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. Yes. I mean, look, we don't have to let this ruin everything. We've been together for years. Doesn't that mean something to you? I studied her carefully. If I didn't know her as well as I did, I might have thought she was sincere. But I did know her. This wasn't regret. This wasn't guilt. This was survival. She wasn't trying to make amends, she was trying to recover. Trying to cling to whatever control she had left. I shook my head. You're unbelievable. Her eyes flashed. Oh, come on. You can't seriously be throwing everything away over this. Everything. I let out a dry laugh. Emily, you threw everything away the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you. Her jaw clenched. I never said that. You didn't have to. Silence. Then she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Fine. You want to leave? Go ahead. But don't act like you're some innocent victim. You enjoyed this, didn't you? She sneered. Ruining me. Tearing me down. You liked watching me suffer. I held her gaze. No, Emily. I liked watching you finally face the truth. She scoffed, turning away, her arms crossing tightly over her chest. You're just as cruel as you think I am. Maybe. But the difference was, I didn't pretend to be something I wasn't. I grabbed my keys off the counter and turned toward the door. I'll send someone to pick up my things. She whirled around. What? I opened the door, stepping out into the cool night air. This is over, Emily. Her face twisted in anger and desperation. You think you can just walk away? She shrieked. You think you can just leave me like this? I met her eyes one last time. Watch me. And with that, I closed the door behind me, leaving her standing there in the ruins of everything she'd built. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. The biting wind whipped at his face as he walked away, the taillights of his car disappearing into the night. He didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. The house, once a symbol of shared dreams and promises, now stood as a hollow monument to betrayal and shattered trust. He felt a strange mix of numbness and exhilaration, the adrenaline slowly fading, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. He found himself driving aimlessly, the road unwinding before him like a ribbon of uncertainty. He had no destination, no plan. Just the need to escape, to put as much distance as possible between himself and the wreckage of his former life. The radio played softly, a melancholic tune that seemed to mirror the ache in his heart. He switched it off, preferring the silence, the solitude. The weight of the past few days pressed down on him, the memories flashing through his mind like shards of broken glass. Emily's laughter, once a source of joy, now echoed with the sting of deceit. Mark's smug grin, a constant reminder of his arrogance and betrayal. The video, the evidence, the weapon he had wielded to dismantle their carefully constructed facade. He pulled over to the side of the road, the engine idling softly. He stared out at the dark expanse of the countryside, the stars twinkling faintly in the distance. He felt a profound sense of loss, not just for Emily, but for the future he had envisioned, the life he had believed in. He had loved her, truly loved her, and the depth of her betrayal had left a gaping wound in his soul. But beneath the pain, a flicker of something else began to emerge. A sense of liberation, of newfound freedom. He was no longer bound by the chains of a toxic relationship, no longer trapped in a web of lies and deceit. He had chosen to fight back, to reclaim his life, and in doing so, he had discovered a strength he never knew he possessed. He thought of Emily, of the life she had chosen, the path she had taken. He felt no anger, no resentment, only a quiet sadness. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. He had made his too. He had chosen to walk away, to start anew, to build a future free from the shadows of the past. He reached for his phone, the one he had used to record the video, the one that had become a symbol of his revenge. He hesitated for a moment, then with a decisive movement, he deleted the file. It was time to let go, to move on. The past was the past, He couldn't change it, but he could control his future. He started the car again, the engine roaring to life. He turned the wheel, heading in a new direction, towards the unknown. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he was going somewhere. Somewhere better. Somewhere where he could heal, where he could grow, where he could find happiness again. The road stretched out before him, long and winding, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of hope. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. He was free. He was alive. And that was enough. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He traveled, explored, met new people. He threw himself into his work, finding solace and purpose in his passion. He learned to trust again, to open his heart, to believe in the possibility of love. He never forgot Emily, but the pain gradually faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. He understood that their paths had diverged, that they were destined for different futures. He wished her no ill will, only the hope that she would find her own way, her own happiness. One day, he found himself in a small coastal town, drawn to the rhythm of the waves, the salty air, the sense of peace that permeated the atmosphere. He rented a small cottage overlooking the ocean, and for the first time, he felt like he had come home. He started painting again, something he had abandoned years ago, lost in the demands of his marriage. He found joy in the colors, in the textures, in the act of creation. He rediscovered his passion, his purpose, his true self. He met a woman, a kind, gentle soul who shared his love of art, his appreciation for the simple things in life. Her name was Sarah, and she saw him for who he was, not for who he had been. She loved him unconditionally, and he loved her in return. He learned to forgive, not just Emily, but himself. He realized that holding on to anger and resentment only hurt him, that true healing came from letting go, from embracing the present, from looking towards the future. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his cottage, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, he received a letter. It was from Emily. He hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Her words were simple, heartfelt. She apologized for the pain she had caused, for the mistakes she had made. She told him that she was finally happy, that she had found peace, that she had learned from her experiences. She wished him well, and she thanked him for helping her see the truth. He read the letter again, a sense of closure washing over him. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. He was finally free. He had found his own happiness, his own peace. He had rebuilt his life, stronger, better, more fulfilling than before. He looked out at the ocean, the waves crashing against the shore, the stars twinkling in the sky. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the salty air. He was home. He was happy. He was finally at peace.